I am Jane Hauser. I am the Director of Marketing and Outreach here at NESCA, and I am joined by Kelly Challen, Director of Transition Services and Assistant Director of the Practice, as well as Julie Robinson, Occupational Therapist and Director of Clinical Services. Thank you so much for joining us today to learn a little bit more about NESCA and how we may be able to help you and your family. Just a quick housekeeping item. If you do have a question, if you could just type it into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. And Julie and Kelly will be sure to answer those at the end of the presentation. And if you're having any kind of technical difficulties, feel free to chat to me or raise your hand. And with that, I will turn it over to Kelly, who will take it away.
Thanks so much, Jane. Thanks so much for anybody who's tuning in with us here today. I do just want to say, you can probably see this on the first slide. We had a last minute speaker change and Dr. Ann Helmus is not able to join us today. So that means that I'm taking her pieces of the presentation. So you're going to hear a lot from me today. And you're going to be really excited when you hear from Julie and you get that change of speaker. Our goal for this afternoon is to teach you all a little bit about NESCA and the services we offer. You may know something about NESCA, but it's really unlikely that you realize the full range of things that we do because we're pretty unique and we've grown a lot over the years. So we're excited to be able to talk about these services. And we have about under an hour of information to present. We're expecting the whole presentation to take an hour, so we'll present to you for a little bit and we look forward to taking questions at the end. NESCA was founded in 2007, so we're 14 years old, and we were founded by Dr. Ann Helmus, and we're a neuropsychology and integrative treatment practice with a staff of more than 20 master's and doctoral level clinicians working across 3 offices in Newton and Plainville, Massachusetts, as well as Londonderry, New Hampshire. And we really specialize in evaluation and treatment of children from about 20 months of age through young adults aged 30 and slightly above. We have an amazing team of staff who subscribe to the core values on this slide, including working collaboratively, caring deeply about our clients and their families, building lasting relationships, solving challenging problems in creative ways, and being part of a community of lifelong learners. And I'm going to actually do something a little bit atypical here. I'm going to have to stop screen sharing and then adjust the screen share on the next slide here because I want to play you a video and I want to make sure that I can share the sound. And actually, it looks like I can just switch this over. So if this technology works, I'm going to show you a video that really captures who we are here at NESCA. So as far as who we treat, there are really no profiles of, my mouse just did its own thing there. There's really no profiles of students at NESCA that we're unable to treat, although there's certainly students who have lower incidence disabilities, such as sensory impairments related to hearing or vision, and those may be less prevalent in our practice than students with autism or trauma or learning disabilities, but we treat everyone. And often the students who we do see at NESCA have complex presentations. They maybe don't fit neatly into one diagnostic category. So these are students who may have had a history of other testing that hasn't felt like it captured who the student was, or even testing that provided contradicting pictures of the student, and may come to NESCA for a more clear and holistic perspective. And as I mentioned, we work with students often from 20 months through young adulthood. And this is just another summary of the services we offer in case you didn't catch them all in the video. So there's a whole variety of things here as far as evaluations and screening, and we're going to talk through these in the coming slides. NESCA does have 11 pediatric neuropsychologists on staff who provide neuropsychological and psychological evaluations to children as young as 20 months and up through age 30 across our 3 offices. And if you're not familiar with neuropsychological evaluation, this is an evaluation process that results in a highly detailed description of an individual's developmental status, thinking patterns, and learning style. I think a clear difference between a neuropsych or neuropsychological testing and other types of testing is that 1 or 2 clinicians are carefully integrating developmental history information, so interview and record information from early in a child's life, clinical observations, reports from teachers and parents and clinicians, and data from the actual testing, and then sort of pull all of that information together to provide clear diagnostic information and detailed recommendations. This is really different than when you sort of have one evaluator testing each piece of a student's profile and not necessarily synthesizing that all together. And NESCA believes that tests don't diagnose, people do, and that's why we take such a thorough, tailored approach to get it right on behalf of our clients. When you're unfamiliar with neuropsychological evaluation and there's so much variation in the price and format of the assessment, it can be hard to know whether you're getting a good assessment. So we have put together a list of bullet points detailing some of the information to look for in a good evaluation. And you could turn these into questions and take them to a neuropsychologist ahead of time. Some of the things that are important to ask might be, do you ever make developmental risk statements in your reports? Talk about the risks if certain things are not treated or intervened with. Also knowing if somebody will will you attend a team meeting with me to help make sure that my team implements the recommendations in the report? It's one thing to have an assessment process and to know what to do, but will the evaluator actually help you to find the people who can help implement those recommendations or go and advocate for their report in a team meeting? Those are important questions to ask, and there's some other items on this list. This information is also on our website where we have many FAQs about our services. And students who come in for, or children or adults who come in for neuropsychological evaluation, we can also add psychological testing, which is also called projective or performance-based testing to our neuropsychological evaluations. I think a test that many people have heard of that's, projective testing is like the Rorschach test with the picture that people have to make meaning of. But psych testing includes powerful diagnostic tools if they're administered and interpreted in conjunction with observation and other standardized tests by a skilled, experienced practitioner. It's helpful, especially for children and teens with complex social and emotional challenges. Provides information about a child's thinking patterns and how they experience emotions and self-esteem and their habits of interacting with others, but it's not for everyone. So it's really important to make sure that you're working with somebody who has expertise in this area and has a sense of whether this kind of testing will be appropriate for the individual and is really going to come out with information that's going to be meaningful. This again is just a little bit more information about some of the common referral questions in terms of when projective testing might really be needed for a young person. So certainly if there's anything around thinking problems or emerging psychosis, trauma, attachment, a lot of mood kinds of issues, developing personality issues, really high-risk behaviors, substance abuse, poor emotion regulation, or certainly self-harm. Those are times that this kind of testing might be an important addition. And I just wanted to show this. We've actually been, since COVID-19 began, really since March of 2020, we modified our offices so that we're able to offer contactless testing, and we still have these setups available in our Newton and our Londonderry, New Hampshire offices. And so we have this ability to offer contactless testing for most of our clients. And then sometimes we're not offering it in this windowed suite. We might be able to do testing or services that are set up more socially distanced outdoors or in a large office in order to just make sure that we're maintaining safety for all of our clients and our staff. During COVID, we've also felt it was important to open an autism diagnostic clinic to be able to support children who needed to be evaluated to determine if they have this diagnosis so that they could access insurance-based services such as ABA, speech, and OT, and other kinds of treatment that would be necessary. So this ASD diagnostic clinic is different from our neuropsychological evaluations. It's most appropriate for students who are ages 2 to 3 up through about 5 years and 11 months. And it's a more rapid evaluation process, integrating history and current skill set using specific tools designed to diagnose autism. It's not the same as a full neuropsych, as I said, because the only referral question we answer through this process is whether the child does or does not have autism. And the recommendations are really focused on immediate interventions that will be appropriate at home and using your insurance funding. We have clinicians in all 3 of our offices who have expertise in working with children in this age range and providing this type of assessment. And we do take Blue Cross for this assessment or private pay. Post-secondary transition services is my passion and area of expertise because I'm a transition specialist. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So if you're not familiar with this term, post-secondary transition refers to the process of leaving secondary education and assuming post-secondary adult roles. Special education expertise is a big part of what we bring to this process at NESCA. However, we work with a wide range of individuals before, during, and after high school to support them in making progress toward post-secondary adult goals, such as further education, employment, independent living, and community engagement. And we offer assessment, transition assessment for students on IEPs or vocational assessment for students maybe who aren't on IEPs. We also offer consultation to parents, schools, and families, case management for post-12th grade programs when somebody might need some programming that doesn't already exist, planning services for students, and skills coaching, including executive function skills, life skills, vocational skills, social skills, college readiness skills, and even some light college counseling. And we do offer trainings and professional development too. So I'm often asked, what's the difference between neuropsychological evaluation and transition assessment? Or sometimes people will come in because a client is between the ages of 14 and 22 and they think it's a transition related issue, but it might actually be a neuropsychological evaluation kind of an issue. And so the difference that I tend to focus on is that neuropsychological evaluation focuses primarily on a student's learning profile and the fit of that learner within their current academic setting. So there's lots of concerns that might be related to why you'd seek out a neuropsych, but when they have to do with whether the student's been learning things that they're supposed to be learning or that we want them to be learning, that a lot of times is a neuropsych question. There's lots of other developmental, emotional, and other kinds of reasons to seek that out. But if you're really concerned about some sort of progress happening or not happening, a lot of times that ends up being a neuropsych question. Transition assessment, in contrast, evaluates the fit of the student and their future preferred learning, living, and employment activities and environments. So more about whether the student is progressing towards their goals for after high school, whether we know enough about the student to figure out what the goals should be after high school. A lot of those are the kinds of questions that relate to transition assessment. In addition to assessment services, we really love working with students to be able to empower them to be part of a team meeting process, to be taking more initiative in their everyday life, even to lead their own team meetings or just have more agency on a daily basis, even small steps, one at a time. One part of this process might sometimes be counseling or coaching for parents or for caretakers or other people working with the individual to kind of figure out new roles and responsibilities as students are getting older. As I mentioned, we've developed a wide range of skill coaching services to support students in developing skills that will be needed in order to meet life goals. such as getting a diploma or college participation, having a job, living more independently. We have executive function coaches, life skill coaches, college coaches, and voc rehab counselors on our team, so we can coach in a wide range of areas. And our coaching program primarily focuses on skills needed for adult post-secondary life. It's headed up by Dr. Sophie Belinas, who's an occupational therapist by training, and services are delivered by doctoral level occupational therapists, by educators, and by transition specialists, depending on the goal that the young person sets in relation to learning, vocation, and community life. This is just a slide that talks more in depth about our executive function coaching. I will say that our team, especially being headed up by an occupational therapist, is really a natural fit for delivering executive function skill instruction, because OTs by nature are used to breaking down tasks into functional components and well-versed in finding ways to modify tasks or tools so that students can effectively carry out tasks with independence. And related to executive function skills for managing schoolwork and real-world activities, Dr. Belinas and her team have helped many students by evaluating and increasing their digital literacy skills this past year. And that's been really important since COVID hit. This is a bit more information about the Real Life Skills Coaching Program. This program primarily serves students in 6th grade and above, and it works on both adaptive and practical independent living skills in real world environments. So a big piece of this is that we are coaching students out in the community, at home, at a work site, in a shopping mall, wherever the skill coaching is needed. And then some of the important activities of daily living, more independent activities of daily living that our coaches focus on include travel training, money management. These kinds of things can be done individually, or we've actually had some schools who contract with us to provide travel training to a dyad or a small cohort of students. And many of the skills we work on include things like building work experience or career assessment and planning, finding leisure activities. There's a really wide range of skills that we work on to try to individualize these services for the young person. And then a newer service that we've just begun offering in the last 9 months is health and life coaching. And this is a 12-week virtual coaching program, and it has support in between sessions, so text or other communications between sessions, and it helps teens and adults to progress toward their own individual health and lifestyle goals. And this program is carried out by Billy Demiri, who's a health coach and certified personal trainer. And now I can turn it over to Julie to talk about our clinic services.
Hi, everyone. So I am the Director of Clinical Services for the OT and Speech Therapy departments at OTA. One of the things that I'll talk about a little bit is there's sort of 2 OT departments in our practice, and how those are different from one another. Kelly, you can change a slide. We have an OT direct sensory motor based program at NESCA. That is the program that is directed by me, and it's geared primarily to children who I would say are about 13 years and under. We're working on issues regarding sensory processing, overload in a lot of different environments, motor development, and the goal of our department, similar to the goal of the other OT department, is to facilitate independence with daily routines. You can change again to a new slide. When we're thinking of direct sensory motor-based therapy, we're targeting areas that might impact daily functioning, either at home or in the school environment or out in the community. Addressing difficulties with feeding, self-care, chores, bath time, meals, how kids are going to fit into daily home life, and how they're going to function in the academic environment as well, what accommodations they might need to their environment, and what they need to succeed. We do a lot of building sensory diets to help children function across environments, to work on coping skills and self-regulation. I think that's something that's really important to address with kids with sensory processing difficulties. We also do have an indoor sensory gym. We do have some therapists, myself included, who work out in the community, where I'm taking kids out to playgrounds or working in their backyards to address issues with fine and gross motor skill development. And then social pragmatics are another part of what we address, because I think we find that a lot of these kids who have sensory and motor issues also have an impact to their daily interactions with their peers. New slide, Kelly. You know, our goals and the things that we're hoping to achieve through our direct OT services are improved self-regulation, improved sleep and eating patterns, better behavioral control and frustration environment. I think a lot of the kids, and I think especially what we're experiencing since COVID began, are kids who are having more significant self-regulation challenges and meltdowns and outbursts. As they transition from, you know, being at home to going back to school to maybe being back at home, and the unpredictability that they face across and every day. We hope to improve their motor skills so that more comfortable playground equipment, engaging in sports activities with their peers, engaging socially with their peers, improving physical strength and coordination. Some of our clinicians do bike riding lessons. That's one a lot of people don't know that OTs will do as part of their therapy. We work on handwriting, improved visual motor skills, visual perception. New page. We also have one therapist, her name is Lauren Zeitler, who has a significant amount of training in feeding therapy. And so she's working a lot with children with restricted food intakes, limited food repertoires, GI issues, to help to improve their both the quality and quantity of the food intake that's happening, but also to help families understand how they can interact with their children around feeding behaviors at home, because that's often a very complex emotional behavioral issue on top of just a feeding issue. We have recently incorporated something called the Safe and Sound protocol into our treatment. It's something that can be done in the office, but it's also something that can be done on a home program for children who are primarily sensitive to sound, but also who have self-regulation difficulties. And we've been finding some really wonderful improvements. And what's a wonderful benefit of this program is it's quite time limited, not more than 15 hours. And a lot of the listening time can be done at home. So it's not something that kids are necessarily having to come into the office all time to do. We address executive function skills and academic performance, how we need to help kids to function with their daily homework routines, you know, keep their schoolwork organized, initiate tasks as well. New page. So that's primarily what the OT sensory motor department is addressing as part of their therapy. There is a lot of overlap between the OTs who work in the educational and transition department are working on. And you know, the educational department is primarily for kids who are sort of over the age of 13, but there's definitely some overlap. And Dr. Belenis and I work very closely together when intakes come in to look at the information that's presented and sort of figure out who would be the most appropriate team to meet the needs of these students. And also working with Dr. Challen and her team, again, to sort of figure out what's the most appropriate way to assess and provide treatment for these children, and what are the most appropriate venues. We do in-office treatment, we have provided services in the home, we've also done virtual treatment, and that's across all the OT departments. We have a variety of ways that we can sort of tackle these skills. In addition to direct treatment services, the OT department does have the ability to provide educational assessment, observation, and consultation. Again, this is primarily done through Dr. Belenis' team, but I have also done some of these evaluations myself, again, depending on the age of the kid and what the presenting problems are. You know, we want to assess whether something physiological is impacting a student's functioning in their educational program, and what supports are needed to help them function at their greatest potential. Sometimes it might be sensory accommodations to the environment. We're looking at where kids need to be seated in the classroom, or do they need spaces for breaks, or what kind of sensory diet things might need to be put in place. But we're also looking at visual motor integration, visual perception, fine motor skills to see what kind of skills need to be addressed in that area, or, you know, whether it be handwriting or computer keyboarding or finding alternatives to communication when it comes down to written work. We can provide functional assessment of home and community-based skills. This is primarily for children who are 5th grade and older, but again, there's some scatter in there. And really the important part of the intake process is to talk to families and find out where the weaknesses are. But we can do observations and assessments across a wide range of areas and settings. Addressing issues with activities of daily living, independent activities of daily living, social communication and participation, executive functioning. I think we really want to make sure that these kids can advocate for themselves across environments. So again, they're taking charge of their learning and they're taking charge of their capacity to function in whatever environment they need to. I think the last thing we want is to be just sort of imposing treatment and work on these kids when we don't know what their goals are or what's important to them. I think it's really important to consider that as part of the process. And again, especially since COVID, helping kids to access technology has been really important with all the Zoom learning and remote learning and all of that as well. And new page. Kelly, I don't know if you have things to add there that I may have left out. No, okay. We also have a speech and language therapy department. Right now, we primarily have one speech therapist. Her name is Olivia Rogers. And she is also providing work in person or virtually. New page. She works with a wide range of ages and diagnoses. I think as Kelly had talked about in the beginning of this presentation, is there's really nothing that we don't feel comfortable taking on from a speech and language therapy perspective. And in addition to just looking at speech and language as the expression of speech or whether kids can understand what's being communicated to them, there's a strong connection between language, reading, writing, and social communication. And we're really looking at kids holistically. We're not just looking, can they produce an appropriate speech sound to communicate so somebody understands the words that are coming out of their mouth. We're looking at language as a holistic sort of process of communication. So our speech and language therapists, again, do assessment and treatment of difficulties with either communication and feeding or swallowing. Primarily right now, the OT department is managing the feeding kids, but we do have some capacity to do it through a speech therapy as well. We're treating speech and language disorders, but we're also working with kids who might have more complex medical and developmental conditions or feeding and swallowing disorders such as dysphagia as well. New page. Our evaluation in the speech and language therapy department is meant to understand a child's strengths, their abilities, and where the weaknesses come into play. An important part of that is really interviewing parents and caregivers to gather information about what's happening across environments to learn about skills. A purpose of our assessment is to determine if a child would benefit from direct speech and language therapy services and to prioritize what the goals would be for therapy. Most of the time when we're doing insurance-based assessment, it's more concise with the amount of time. An insurance assessment only allows us 1 hour to complete a full assessment. In those cases, we're just writing brief reports that outline skills and therapy recommendations, but we do have the capacity to provide comprehensive assessments, just as we do for the OT department, about looking, more at the child's whole picture of expressive and receptive and social language and writing lengthy reports to support what they need in the academic setting or what needs to happen in the home environment rather than just focusing on therapy. Most children do come in for therapy, whether it be in the speech therapy or the OT department, once or twice a week, and our sessions are 45 minutes long. For the younger kids, we're really focusing on play-based therapy and making sure that we have the engagement from the child. A really good clinician from a therapy perspective has the ability to play with a child without having them know how hard they're working. And I think that that's something that's a real core value of everybody who works in our department is, you know, these kids should be working hard, but they shouldn't be stressed out and they shouldn't be pushed to the point where it's an unpleasant experience for them. I think we really try to keep it as upbeat and play-based as we can, focusing on a developmental continuum of what's appropriate and really trying to keep mindful of, you know, where a child is functioning as opposed to where they need to, you know, should be functioning necessarily. So if I'm working with a child who's functioning as a 3-year-old, that's where I want to meet their needs, not focusing on what they should be doing as a 5-year-old as my primary goal, if that makes sense. We provide therapy to, again, a wide range of students in the speech and language therapy department all the way through adolescence. New page. I talked a little bit about feeding therapy already. I'll talk a little bit more specifically about it now, but the approach that we take at NESCA with feeding therapy is a very sensory-based approach to feeding. There are some feeding therapists who work more from a behavioral angle, and that's not what we do. But looking at kids who might benefit from feeding therapy, if you look at this checklist right here, if your child is eating less than 20 foods consistently, are they specifically limiting certain food groups so that they will not eat any protein or they will not eat any fruits and vegetables? Some children will eat a wide variety of food, but they're limiting their intake to very small bits and pieces at a time. And in those cases, we want to work at, you know, building up to being able to tolerate an entire meal. We deal a lot with kids who have feeding difficulties, and behavior is a huge, huge aspect of feeding. And so I think one of the most powerful tools a child has in their basket when they want to seek control over an environment is to limit their food intake. And that can be really distressing to a parent or family whose goal is, you know, it's one of your most important things as a parent to provide nourishment to your child. So there's often a very strong interplay between behavior and sensory issues with food. And it's important to address sort of the whole family unit. One of the things that we found since COVID is that actually a lot of the feeding therapy that we do by Zoom has been the most powerful feeding therapy, because we get kids working in their kitchen and at their table and at a mealtime with the family. And we're sort of addressing the whole family as a unit. And that's been extremely beneficial for a lot of kids. We do also assist children who are having a hard time transitioning from tube to oral feedings. That's sort of a separate issue to children who have sensory impairments when it comes down to feeding. Or difficulty weaning from a bottle to eating solid food is another thing. Right now, we don't have a feeding therapist who focuses on breastfeeding, but we do have one. She's on maternity leave and coming back in the winter time, and she's actually a lactation consultant and a breastfeeding consultant. So that's something we'll be able to provide again in the near future. New page. Feeding therapy can address lactation issues. In addition to just food intake, children have to feed themselves. So can they access a cup? Can they access the utensils that they need in their daily life? Are there fine motor issues that might be impacting their independence there? Some children may not have adequate strength or may have physical issues that impact their chewing in a functional way, and that's something else that we can address. New page. Feeding therapy, just like any of the other therapies we provide in the office, starts with an assessment. And a lot of this assessment is gathering background information from the parents. We really want to know about what your child's eating on a daily basis. What are the behaviors at meal times? Is there a difference between how your children might be feeding at home? Maybe they're getting a good food intake at home, but at school, you know, with all the sensory stimuli around them, there's no eating going on at school, and that can result in behavioral meltdowns. So really trying to look at kids across the course of their whole entire day and where the impact is. Next page.
So
I think I'm going to allow Kelly to take it from here.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Julie. We're going to transition to some of our other services. We do offer consultation services. It's interesting because I think each of us, through all of our clinical expertise, offer consultation in some ways to a variety of individuals, but we do have a specific consultation department overseen by Dot Lucci, who has decades of experience and is a national and international trainer. And NESCA provides educational consultation services for students from pre-kindergarten through age 22, often funded by schools, but also sometimes funded privately, as well as consultation to businesses, to colleges and universities, to community groups, to families, to just a really wide range of organizations and individuals. And we use the same principles no matter who we're consulting to. And through consultation, we really work to design inclusive environments that support neurodiversity as well as all of the people in the environment, right? So an inclusive environment that's, you know, good for people who have different brains tends to be even better for all sorts of people. And for individuals, we will conduct observations and consultations at IEP meetings. For schools, we will often consult to specific children, or we might consult to a specific program or even system-wide evaluations, and assist in designing interventions that might be designing specific interventions or designing specific programs of instruction, making adjustments to a classroom environment or learning environment, observing students and staff, and then certainly providing direct training for all professionals and individual staff. And I should say, you know, in terms of the school consultations that we do consultations to, you know, public schools as well as students who might be in a private school setting or private preschool setting or any of those kinds of things. These are some more in-depth descriptions of our individual student consultation and our district-wide consultation services. So if it's an individual consultation, specifically about one student, it might include meetings with teachers and parents, record review, observations, development of interventions, often modeling and co-teaching with the instructors and coaching of the professionals working with the student and coaching of the student directly. Also attendance at team and IEP meetings, and in the moment troubleshooting. I think just having the consultant on site at the times that they're on site provides this opportunity to really kind of troubleshoot things in vivo. We also have opportunities where we do district-wide analysis and consultation or college and university consultation. And so this might be more around just how to teach neurodiverse learners in generally, looking at all of the strategies across the system. So interventions and strategies that are going to be more effective for a neurodiverse student body. Working on like housing and socialization for neurodiverse students, thinking more about understanding and teaching to the needs of a specific student population. So sometimes we have had more interest in serving students with a particular disability profile, and that's something that we will do. Certainly students with autism, but we've also had requests for consultation specifically for students who have more language-based learning challenges, or for students who have more nonverbal based learning disabilities, and really coming in and being able to make a system more effective for the requested student profile. And some of the other services we offer, as I mentioned, more of a needs assessment protocol. So looking specifically at the needs of a population and whether they're being served well in the district. We do business consultations for businesses that are interested in serving employees more effectively, and community and agency consultation as well. And NESCA additionally offers integrative treatment services. So a lot of the things that might supplement or be done alternative to medication kinds of treatments. And so we certainly have psychoeducational counseling services for students with emotional, attentional, anxiety, and autism related challenges. And this is kind of a combined therapy with education approach. It's appropriate for some 12-year-olds, but mostly teenagers and young adults are the best fit for this service. And psychoeducational counseling is designed to help young people better understand themselves, improve social competence, and manage their stress. I think it can be particularly important for a student who might be learning about a diagnosis at a certain point in time, or trying to make sense of the diagnosis as an adolescent or as a young adult or things like that, but also just individuals who might be struggling with a lot of different things. Really, the process of some learning and some treatment can be really effective. Dot Lucci, who I mentioned before, provides these services, and Dot uses a variety of theoretical models, a little bit of CBT, a little bit of mindfulness, but really it's a really integrated treatment methodology. Often there's a specific area of challenge that's being addressed, and there's typically homework as part of treatment. So it's not just coming and meeting with Dot once a week. There are activities to happen between sessions to be able to generalize what's being learned in the counseling setting. And parent and caregiver involvement might be included, or there might be separate parent coaching or counseling as part of the service. We also offer a very unique personal and social coaching intervention. This is provided by Billy Demiri, who's a personal trainer and has certifications related to training students with autism, nutrition, and motivational coaching. And so this service combines weekly training with home-based fitness and nutrition goals. And this could be helpful for kids who are struggling with low tone, poor motor planning, proprioception difficulties, or just limited self-esteem about their bodies and coordination. The benefits of this program include the opportunity for young people to have repetitive, successful physical and social experiences, right? So Billy is tailoring the experience so that the student is kind of having a win every time that they're engaging, and also, building up their ability to take on more challenging physical kinds of activities. As confidence builds in physical abilities, they want to participate and socialize more in additional environments and activities. And regular physical activity, can decrease anxiety and depression symptoms. And as children or teens learn to focus on one exercise at a time, you can really see decreases in off-task behavior, right? This sort of body-based ability to focus on things. And while we were not able to offer yoga in person for some time at NESCA, we're pleased to be offering therapeutic yoga again. We're offering this for clients of all ages on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. And Danielle Sugru is both a yoga instructor and a licensed mental health counselor, and she is the provider of therapeutic yoga at NESCA. And especially in light of the pandemic, I think her combined skill sets are so useful, really being able to recognize what's going on as a therapist, but then to be doing the body-based treatment is just really powerful and useful for working with young people. And I am going to turn to our thank you slide, which signifies that we've managed to talk about all the different services that we have in the last 45 minutes, and then we can sort of turn it over and take some questions from the audience.
Yes, thank you, Kelly and Julie. We do have a couple of questions. The first one is, does NESCA have experience with students who have hearing loss?
And Julie, you have to let me know, sort of for your team, different kinds of things as far as experience. But yes, NESCA does have experience with students who have hearing loss, at least, within our evaluations process in terms of both our neuropsychological evaluations and transition assessments. And certainly our clinicians have experience with students with hearing loss. I think there are a lot of people with hearing loss is a wide spectrum of people. And so I think there are certainly sometimes other professionals that, there are almost always other professionals who need to be involved in a student's care too. But as far as doing a thorough evaluation and being able to take into account a lot of different factors, that's something we're able to do. I have sometimes found that making sure that a student has really good speech language evaluation, making sure that they have really up-to-date audiology information can be so important for being able to do some of the other kinds of evaluation processes that we have. So there can be other things that sort of supplement our being able to do really good work with students who have hearing impairments.
Great. And then does the neuropsychological evaluation, is it adaptable and sensitive enough for children who are either bi or multilingual, where English may be their fully dominant language? And then also, is a good report only achieved if English is their dominant and primary language?
So there was a little bit of an echo there. I'm not sure how we came through on our stream, but this is a really important and complicated question in terms of how to best carry out neuropsychological evaluation for a student who might be bilingual or multilingual. And I think, you know, most of the tools that we're using sort of designed in English. There are some tools that can be carried out really effectively in Spanish, but we do not have any bilingual or multilingual evaluators on staff, although we do have some clinicians. Julie has an occupational therapist on her team who happens to be bilingual for working with families in Spanish. But in terms of carrying out the neuropsychological evaluations, it sort of depends what the referral question is and what we're trying to learn about the student and whether we're going to be able to get enough information. And so there are many, many times that we're able to work with students where English is their dominant language and they do speak other languages, and to be able to do a very thorough and accurate and appreciative evaluation of that young person and provide recommendations that are spot on and appropriate. If there was any concern that carrying out the evaluation process in English wasn't going to be most effective for the students, that's something that we would bring up. I think, you know, one of the things that we always strive to do is to make sure that the student is getting the evaluation that they need. And so there may be times that we actually help a family to find somebody who's an evaluator who's bilingual as well. There are also times that, there are plenty of people that standardized tests are not designed for. And so there are other times that we work with families and figure out the best way to carry out an evaluation process, and are also very candid about the recommendations that we can make based on the information we have and the ability to get accurate information about the individual, and where we will also put information in the report about what things may underestimate a student's potential, or what pieces may still need to be paid attention to down the road, because based on the tools that we are able to use at this point in time, based on what's been designed, sometimes there are certainly limitations. I mean, I know we're talking about bilingual students, but I think a great example is students with vision impairments. There are a lot of limitations in terms of tools just not being designed well for students with vision impairments, and there are a lot of ways that some standardized tests will underestimate potential. So again, there's not a one size fits all answer. It very much has to do with the particular student, the language they're speaking, how old they are, how competent they are with English, and the settings that we expect the student to be functioning in and learning in going forward.
Great, thank you. And is coaching more of a one-on-one process or group learning?
Sure. So in terms of our coaching services, and we're saying coaching, but there's a really wide range of coaching services that we offer. We offer one-on-one coaching because we recognize that that's really relevant and important for teens and young adults, and sometimes students younger than that. And so it's designed to be a really individualized process. And so typically the beginning of a process, often regardless of what kind of coaching we're doing, is going to be a little bit of an intake process and an assessment process, and the student actually identifying some of the goals that they want to work on. And so that is absolutely done best individually, one-on-one. With that said, there are certainly times that there are students who are compatible to work with one another for a particular reason, or students who the skills that they are needing and wanting to work on are really well aligned, and where we have done coaching services or sessions for small groups of students. One of the things I mentioned is that that will sometimes be part of something that we contract with a school or with an agency to offer. You know, if it's specifically, say, a group of students in central Massachusetts who all need to learn to use transportation, and they happen to be similarly aged and have sort of similar cognitive learning styles too, right? Because we want to make sure that the materials we're using are going to be appropriate for the same set of students. Then we might offer, you know, like 1-on-2 coaching or 1-on-3 coaching. We probably wouldn't go beyond that. One thing we do is some sexual health instruction that we actually do offer in a small group as opposed to individually, because that actually tends to work better in a small group. But the majority of our coaching is 1-on-1. And again, that's because it's very relational. It's very much about figuring out what the student needs to work on and what they're motivated to work on, and, you know, sort of connecting with that student on an individual level and being able to really help them make growth and progress. And certainly the executive function coaching, I mean, each of us, I'm sure each of us presenting today and everybody tuning into this probably has a completely different set of organizational tools that we use to get through the day. And so, you know, that kind of process is really best done individually. Any other questions?
So it doesn't look like we have any right now. I can give just a minute to see if we have any others chiming in. I think that is it. We have actually accomplished everything in an hour or less. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Kelly and Julie for the presentation. If anybody does have questions, please do feel free to reach out to me. And also we can share this presentation with you over email as well. Thank you so much for joining, and take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.